Hi, I'm Michelle Chalfant, psychotherapist, holistic life coach, and human just like you, learning to navigate life's challenges. With over 25 years experience, I teach people how to get healthy using the adult chair model. The adult chair model is where simple psychology meets grounded spirituality, and it teaches us how to become healthy adults. From anxiety and depression to codependency and relationship issues, you can use the adult chair for just about anything. Each week, I share practical tips, tools, and advice from myself and a wide range of experts on how to get unstuck, how to live authentically, and how to truly love yourself, all while sitting in your adult chair. Welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast, where we talk all about how to be emotionally healthy adults. I am Michelle Chalfant, and I am delighted to be here with you on this lovely day in April 20th, 2023. We are on podcast number 363 today and have two very special guests on the show. We have Linda and Charlie Bloom, who are psychotherapists and relationship counselors. Boy, oh boy, did we have a great show talking all about how to navigate your relationship. They offered some incredible advice that I believe you are going to love today. Yeah, I got into it with them. I asked them every question you can imagine when it comes to relationships. So we had a blast. They are absolutely lovely. They have years and years and years of experience doing this work. So I am delighted to be here with them today. Okay. I want to share with you some of the things that we chatted about today. These are questions that have come in, I got to tell you, over the course of a while, I should say, whether it be email or in social. I want to get a DM or comments. So here's some questions that you all have asked me that I then turned around and asked them today. Things like this, like, what do you do? This is a big one that I get a lot, but what do you do when the person that you're arguing with doesn't want to talk about it? How do you get that person to talk about it? Another question that comes in a lot is, what if you are doing your personal work and your partner is not? What do you do? What if you're in a relationship with someone and they just, they don't want to go where you're going? How do you navigate those waters? We also talked about, what do you do and how do you repair trust, when it's been broken? It's a hard one. Whether it be there's lies or an affair or something going on, how do you build up trust again? And are there questions that we should ask ourselves when deciding to stay or leave in a situation? Another question is, do we really attract our partners based on our childhood wounding? I've talked about that before. That is one of my favorite topics to talk about. It's a hard one to swallow, but you'll be interested to hear what they had to say about that. So lots and lots and lots of great things that we talked about today. So let me go ahead and tell you a little bit about Linda Bloom and Charlie Bloom. They're trained as psychotherapists and relationship counselors. They've worked with individuals, couples, groups, and organizations since 1975 and have lectured and taught at learning institutes throughout the United States and internationally. They've authored 5 books, including the bestseller, 101 Things I Wish I Knew When I Got Married, Simple Lessons to Make Love Last. They've also written Secrets of Great Marriages, Happily Ever After, and 39 Other Myths About Love. Also, most recently, An End to Arguing, 101 Valuable Lessons for All Relationships. Who does not need that book? Go get that book. It's such a good one. Anyway, it is with great, great, great pleasure that I introduce to you today, Charlie and Linda Bloom. Here we go. So welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast, Linda and Charlie Bloom.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting us.
Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have both of you. You both are a wealth of wisdom here with all of the books that you've written. In the most recent book, An End to Arguing, which I'm excited to hear more about, 101 Valuable Lessons for All Relationships. What an important topic this is. And Here at the Adult Chair podcast, what we talk about or what we teach is how we teach humans how to be emotionally healthy adults. So this topic today is very, very important. I cannot wait to hear what you have to say about this. I wanted to ask you first how you both got passionate about relationships and working with couples. Like what happened that you now are doing all this beautiful work in the world?
We hit a rough patch 12 years into our relationship, and we hit an irreconcilable difference because Charlie was working and traveling when the kids were small. And it was so stressful that we were chronically fighting about it. But we're both good students. We pay attention and we learn. We learn from our mistakes.
Yeah.
So it was important for us to be able to tell skillful communication from unskillful communication. And we learned a lot during that challenging time. And lo and behold, people wanted to know about it. We were therapists at the time, and that's what turned the specialty into treating couples and teaching couples workshops. And so a very significant part of the workshop that we teach, Secrets of Great Relationships, is about conflict management and how to do it gracefully.
So are you self-taught? I know you both have been doing this a very long time. I'm curious, who were your teachers? Who were you reading? Like, who were you studying with?
Well, Stephen Levine was my most important mentor, and he's a wonderful spiritual teacher. He's not in his body anymore, but his teachings live on because they're profound. We've
Beautiful.
also availed ourselves of some of the other wonderful teachers. Harville Hendricks is a wonderful teacher, and taken his workshop as a student. And I have read hundreds of relationships. I really believe in bibliotherapy. So I think that there can be a lot to be learned. And we had some gifted and skilled people who filled in where our parents hadn't modeled for us. No blame on our parents. If they had known better and they could model better for us, they would have. They gave us the best they had, but it really fell short of what we needed.
I say, I absolutely, I say that all the time, that our parents really do the best that they can. But, and so therefore, because our parents, I don't know if, I mean, you guys have been doing this a long time. I don't think there is such a thing as the perfect parent or the healthiest parent, because we get passed down our wounding or the lineage. I mean, things that happen from great grandparents are affecting us. So how can we show up perfectly, and I have air quotes here for those that can't see me, perfectly healthy? It's impossible. And I personally believe that we are here as souls to learn and grow and to experience some of these things and work through them. We're not meant to come in without any issues or not to have issues to work through. So that's really part of the game. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's necessary to agree with that or any particular philosophy in order to really create the best relationship that you can possibly create. It's not about a set of beliefs that are going to take you to the ideal place. It's not about perfection. And one of the things that many of us grow up with is the idea that we have to be perfect or pretty damn close to it. And there are consequences for not making it. Consequences that can come from our family, can come from our education system, can come from our jobs, there's, the expectations on most of us are significant. And we don't all come into adulthood with the understanding that the best you can do is the best you can do. And that's enough. And your best doesn't have to conform to the best of the standards that you're living in. However, there are consequences to not fulfilling that. And that's where emotional intelligence, which your work is really about, comes in, where you begin to realize that you don't have realistic expectations of yourself, and that you want to sometimes we just need to adjust them and not be so punitive with ourselves when we fail or disappoint ourselves, because we can never give any more acceptance and appreciation to somebody else than we can give to ourselves. And that was one of the main lessons that we learned in doing this work.
I love that. Can you say that again? That was really good. That very last piece. Well, what I hear you say, what I heard you say was, I interpreted that to be self-love, self-worth, like really, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and we can't give that experience of worth to another person if we haven't internalized it within ourselves. And, you know, that doesn't mean that we have to be obsessed with me. I've got to make sure that I love myself because I can't love anybody else until I do. Well, that's not true. It is, you know, in fact, we learn to love ourselves through relationships, through the process of letting ourselves feel the natural sense of appreciation and connection that comes from a meaningful relationship. And that creates self-love. It's not something that's done in a vacuum. It's done in the context of relationship.
I agree. I really, really believe that as well. I mean, we need others to reflect who we are and where we are in our life path, what's missing. So to your point, self-love or love. And do you find that in all the years that you've worked with couples, that it's difficult for people to let love in?
Yes, you're absolutely right. That a lot of people are really hungry, just famished for love.
Yeah.
That there is love coming towards them. Their partner may really be devoted to them, you know, in a really committed and meaningful way. But their self-worth isn't high enough yet.
Yeah.
To feel worthy and deserving of it. The other thing that we find is that sometimes people tend to give love the way they like it shown to them.
Right.
And it might not be hitting the spot. They're hungry for love, but they haven't articulated to themselves even, or their partner, exactly what is on the mark. And I love Gary Chapman's book, and I always recommend his book to all the couples that we work with. I announce it in class and when we do this work, because he really nails it, that we need to know what our favorite love language or love languages are.
Yeah.
Be sure to communicate that effectively to our partner, because if their love language is touch and they're hugging us and it's not really what we want the words, do you know, where we want the acts of service or maybe the gifts or how we spend our quality time, that this is communication that really needs to take place between the couple. Not just once, multiple times, so that they really are delivering the love in a way that it's soul nourishing to the other person.
Yeah. And, you know, I can't tell you how many, and I'm sure you've heard this too, but I can't tell you the number of couples that I've worked with. And that was not my predominant practice. My practice was mostly individual, but I did work with my fair share of couples. And there would be such, you know, arguments over the fact, well, he or she should have known better. We've been together for a month, a year, 10 years, 20 years. And I'm like, no, they shouldn't know better. You need to educate them on what you need. I don't care how long you've been together. And I think we expect our partners to be psychic and to know. And I say, like, listen, if you go to dinner and your partner knows that you like an iced tea with a side of sugar, that's one thing. But don't expect them to know what's going on with you emotionally. That's your job to share with them what you need. Correct?
You're absolutely right. And there's so many of those limiting beliefs that trip people up that we wrote a book about that. It's called Happily Ever After, and 39 other myths about love. And that's one of the favorite in the collection is, if he really loved me, he'd read my mind and he'd know what I need. And I really had that romantic myth in the early part of our relationship, and I was sure that it was true. It took me a while to mature and realize that I didn't want to get vulnerable and ask for what I wanted, because that's tender territory there that you might get rejected, you might get refused. But when I grew some courage and I started to ask, I got loved in the way I wanted to be loved.
I love that. That's beautiful. Wow. What do you say to someone that says, I don't know what happened. I tried really hard not to marry one of my parents, and I did. I did. I did. I don't know how it happened, but my partner is treating me. They didn't look the same. I remember I had a client. She said to me, I moved out of state. I went to a different part of the country. I told myself I would date someone that was exactly not like my father. And what do you know? The end result is I'm having the same experience as I did with my father. Talk to us a little bit about that. Like, what the heck is that all about?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is 4 words. Welcome to the club. And guess who's in it? All of us.
All of us, right? Yeah.
We're all in that club, and we're all asking the same question that you're asking. I was so sure that I was going to marry anybody but somebody like that person, and they sure didn't look like that at first, but the longer we've been together, the more I see. What is that about? And it's a great question, and what I've kind of come to see is that there's to whatever degree we've come into adulthood with unfinished business, with stuff that is not complete within ourselves, with aspects of ourselves that we haven't fully claimed and honored, or resisted, or pushed away, or denied, or tried to cover up or conceal. That makes us feel kind of unfinished and incomplete, although we may not consciously associate some of the feelings that go along with that with having denied parts of ourselves. We just figure that, well, that's part of how life is. But there's a part of us that I think is innate within all human beings to want to feel whole, to want to feel integrated, that I've got all of who I am. I haven't had to push anything away and deny it, but I can accept and even hopefully appreciate those parts of me that I had denied or demonized. And that part of us kind of unconsciously attracts us to people who can provide that which we have denied. And it also makes us attractive to them because we've got something in us that they have denied within themselves. None of this stuff is conscious.
Right. Yeah, which is, I'm glad you said that. Like, nobody should beat up on themselves or judge themselves. Like, oh my God, what did I do wrong? I attracted that person to me that I got it wrong. No. It's an unconscious attraction that pulls you toward that person to help you to resolve something from your childhood that just is not resolved. It's not a bad thing. It's actually, I say the same thing about when we're triggered. It's an opportunity for healing.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right. And I think a very deep part of us knows. It's below the level of consciousness, but the soul knows.
Soul knows.
Only is attracted to people who are going to help us, what Charlie calls, handle the unfinished business, because there's this innate drive for mastery.
Yeah.
And part of us just isn't going to be peaceful until we get it right. So if in our family of origin, for instance, we were the neglected child or the ignored child, we want to be heard, we want to be seen, we want to be valued, we want to feel that we're precious. And if we had a controlling parent, do you know that as a child, we didn't have the power to stand up and draw boundaries and say no, and that doesn't work for me, that we finally are with somebody who's going to work with us so that we can draw those boundaries and say no, and really, find a way to have our personal power with them.
Yeah.
And I always say AFGO, another friggin' growth opportunity. But if we take it on as a challenge, that drive for mastery will lead us.
Yeah, so true. Something that I have found over the almost 20 some years of working with clients is that at the core of what how do I say this? The core of what's going on with humans, like the thing that we really need to work on that helps with other things is self-worth. I know you guys have worked with the clients a very, very long time. Do you find that with people? Like it's a matter of self-worth, or what is the most common core issue that you find with your clients?
I think it's some version of self-worth, and it shows up
Yeah.
in many different ways.
Mhm.
Sometimes it shows up in the opposite way, which is arrogance or superiority.
Mhm.
But people who are, really ego inflated and, have this sense of I'm better than everybody else, and they have to go out and make sure everybody knows it. Those are usually people who have a damaged sense of self-worth.
Mhm.
And I think that it's not just those people, but I think it's very hard to, grow into adulthood without having some diminishment of our natural sense of unconditional value.
Yeah.
Because even if we have, and we've known a few people, there's not a lot, who have had what pretty close to ideal parenting from their family, and they still have issues with self-worth, even though they were bathed in love from their parents. This is the exception.
Yeah.
It wasn't quite perfect.
Yeah.
But because we live in a world that is conditional in terms of its evaluation of people, that there are certain standards that we have to fulfill in order to be worthy of acceptance and approval and appreciation. So we have to deal with that, and it shows up in all of our institutions. It shows up in the world that we live in. We kind of integrate that. We can't help but compare and measure ourselves in accordance with the ideals that are presented through the media, through entertainment, movies, TV, and it's almost impossible not to compare yourself, even unconsciously or consciously. And it is impossible to fulfill those standards because they're not real.
Right.
Real people that we're comparing ourselves to.
Right.
And they're idealized versions of who we believe we should be. So we can't help but have some doubt about our own intrinsic value. So we may think our value has to come from taking care of other people, from how we can accomplish things and how much money we can make, and all these other things that are extrinsic. So it's very difficult, in this world, and it's not just in America, but it's in general in the Western world to a great degree. We've done a lot of traveling, and we've been in countries where there's large indigenous populations. They don't have the same issue with self-worth.
Wow.
We do. It's striking, but
Wow.
and I'm not idealizing that either.
Yeah. So why is that? What is that? What's the difference between us and other countries or cultures?
I think that in those cultures where people do feel more secure within themselves and don't question their value and don't have these unrealistic standards to live up to, those are generally people who are materially poorer than we are here, and they are required to be interdependent. They need each other. They know they need each other. The illusion that if we make enough money, we don't have to be dependent upon anybody because we can buy our way through anything. Money is power. Money is freedom. That's how our culture sees it. In these cultures, they don't have the luxury of being able to see it that way. And so they know that they have to get along with each other because they are interdependent. We have the illusion that we don't need to, that we can afford to alienate people because we can just replace them with somebody else.
Wow. So what are two things that people can do if they're listening right now and they're realizing I need to build up my inner worth or my inner value of self? Like what can we start doing like today to work with that?
To accept the truth that we are so much more than we know.
Mm.
We so much more than we give ourselves credit for, that we
Mhm.
are already and can grow into who we want to be. And it's a
Mhm.
piece of work.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen by itself.
Right.
But hanging around people who have a higher level of self-esteem, it does rub off. They reflect back our greatness, our special gifts, our unique wonderfulness, and that's important. To make a contract with your partner, should you have one, or close friends, a
Mhm.
women's group, men's group, couples group, that is part of the agenda. I really want to grow into who I can be. And there's all kinds of research about the small portion of people's intellectual ability, physical ability, emotional capacity, that we use a small part of it.
Mm.
Act as if, they say in the 12
Yes.
steps.
Yes.
My meditation teacher, Jack Kornfield, says it's okay to act enlightened until we get enlightened.
So,
We kind
yeah.
of grow into it. And one of the things that we do when we work with couples is invite them to let their imagination be big.
Mm.
You really work together and
Mm.
mutually supported each other. If you were each other's believing eyes, if you used all the crappy things in your relationship to bloom out of, it was all for your growth. It was all for your learning. It was all for your evolution. What would that look like? And hold the standard, hold a gold standard, and choose to affirm that you're worth it.
Mm.
And that
That's
together
good.
you can do it. None of us could do it by ourselves. But with our family of choice, some people have literal blood family that will support them. But particularly if you have a committed partnership with somebody, to make that kind of a contract that you're going to bring out the best in each other.
Yeah. I think about some clients that I've had in the past that would say when they were around people, like if they felt low self-worth, when they were around people that had higher self-worth or value, it actually kicked up a lot of shame for them and they felt badly about themselves. And they didn't, instead of feeling like the other person's self-worth or self-esteem was rubbing off on them, they actually felt worse. So they would retreat and not want to hang out with them. What do you say to someone like that?
Yeah, well, I think that's a really good example of what I was saying earlier about the tendency to compare ourselves to other
Yeah.
people. And,
Mhm.
a lot of people feel more comfortable around people who have lower self-worth because it doesn't remind them of their own lack
Yeah.
of.
Yeah.
And so, I think the first thing is just to recognize that if you spot it, you got it.
Yeah.
Means, to me, what that means is that if you can see something in somebody that you really admire and respect and maybe even envy, like a quality, like, man, that person is inspiring, they're courageous, or they're really powerful. If you can recognize that in them, then you have that seeds for that in you. It may not be fully actualized. It may not have been fully expressed or experienced, but you wouldn't even be able to see it if that wasn't already in you. So your question then is to find out, how do I nurture this seed of power, of passion, of value in me? That person they seem so comfortable within their own skin, in their body. One of the things that we've done is we've made a study of that, and I don't have any problem going up to somebody and acknowledging, somebody that I have some connection with, at least, what I appreciate about them. Ask them, how did you get that way anyway?
Ooh, I love that.
Powerful question, and people love to be asked the question.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I would imagine that people would love to answer that, right? To share how they got that way. That's beautiful. Thank you for that. I love that. Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit. Let's go into talking about arguing. and how we're going to strengthen our relationships here. So, what can you do when the person that you're arguing with does not want to talk about it? I get this question a lot, actually. People on social have recently messaged me on this. My partner does not want to talk about it. They don't want to work through it. They want to ignore it. They want to sweep it under the carpet. They just want it to go away and pretend like it didn't happen. But then we're sitting here like, well, wait, I feel awful inside. I need to talk about it. What do you do?
I just want to go on the record that it's not all men.
Yes, that's true.
That said, it's most men. And there's research to bear it out. John Gottman says when the tough subjects about the relationship are brought up, 85% of the time, it's the women.
Yeah.
Agitating to deal with it. But sometimes it's the women who are trying to put things under the rug too. And it's very common because there's a very large number of people who are conflict phobic. Yes. They're anger phobic. They think anger is dangerous, and they feel like it's too hot to handle. So they do any kind of thing to distract and to dodge from leaning into the challenge of really getting in there and mixing it up. One of the things that we repeatedly find ourselves saying to the person who's motivated to put the topic on the table and thrash it out as best they can is to appeal to the other person's self-interest. Enlightened self-interest, because we all want to be happy. We don't want to live in a war zone. We don't want to live in a cold, zone where people are tense and irritable and touchy, and to appeal to them that if we can deal with this issue, it's usually money, sex, power, decision-making, in-laws, household tasks, and how to raise the kids. Those are the ones.
You nailed it. That's it.
No matter what the topic is, the same rules apply.
Yeah.
We are going to be better off at the other side if we just understand each other. We don't necessarily have to agree, but if we just can listen to each other respectfully, ask some clarifying questions. Nobody's bad and wrong here. Your feelings are your feelings. I want to respect how you feel. Your needs are your needs. I want to respect what you need. And I want you to respect my needs and my feelings. But we just need to air this out. It's like a wound underneath a bandage that needs to be exposed to the air to be able to, dry out, not get infected. And I don't want us to have an infected relationship. And the other metaphor that I often use is I don't want the channel between the two of us to be clogged up with all this stuff. I want to move the debris out, because if we have a more free-flowing channel, the emotional intimacy is going to be better. The sex is going to be great. We're going to have so much more fun and enjoyment. We're both going to be more happy and at ease. And so if we can appeal to the other person's self-interest, that sometimes helps them to get over their conflict phobia. In there and mix it up with us to discuss things. And once you start having successes with this, there's no going back. But people need to have some successes. So they become the heretics become the pillar of the church. They want to deal with it. They don't want the incompletions to mount up.
I love that. Thank you. So you referenced 3 specific words that should never be used in an argument. And what are they, and why are they so destructive?
Those words are, now I'm giving away the chapter that that's written in. Those words are, you're being defensive.
Oh boy.
And they are almost always spoken accusatorily. It's not a simple statement, but it's an accusation. And that if they weren't being defensive before you said that, then you can be certain that they're being defensive.
Exactly.
So defensiveness is really an expression or an attempt to protect oneself in the face of the possibility of something that they're afraid might happen. in the face of a threat, in the face of danger. So if you notice that your partner is being defensive, and defensiveness, can show up in a lot of different ways. Basically, defensiveness is an attempt to protect oneself, to put up a shield, or to just distract somebody from having a direct encounter. So you can be certain that there's some fear there. They may seem angry, they may seem evasive, they may seem all kinds of things, but 100% of the time, defensiveness is activated by fear. So just realizing that, I know, this person really seems angry. Yeah, they may be, but this fear that's activating the anger. When we see that and understand that, we're less likely to be hostile or aggressive in countering that anger. So what we need to do is to try to cool things down a little bit, to lower the threat level so that they can breathe a little bit easier and feel less threatened. And when we're threatened, we can't be open and receptive to taking in new information. Too busy in a protective mode. So we want to cool things down. We want to recognize that we may have done or said something that has activated their fear. And it may have nothing to do with us. I mean, they may just have an association with somebody who, uses the word bad or something. Who knows? And so when we see that, we can modulate our approach and not be counter defensive or offensive, and just try to reassure them either directly or indirectly that, hey, like Linda said, I'm not mad at you. I'm not trying to, hurt you. I'm not trying to, make you wrong. I'm just wanting us to have an even better relationship than we have right now.
Right.
That's all I want.
I mean, starting a conversation or argument with you, of course, it's going to, I call it throwing the shield up, and out comes the sword and the shield, forget it. You're not going to, that's not a conversation. It's not it's defensiveness, and nothing's going to happen. So I like that a lot. What do you mean by committed listening, and how does it differ from general listening during a discussion? What does committed listening mean?
It means really showing up, being fully present, just like your pores are open. Do you know, you're really paying attention. You're looking at their facial expression. You're looking at their body language. You're so there. And a lot of people, they think good communication is required for a good relationship, but they think about speaking. They don't think about the other side and how important the listening is. And Harville Hendrix is really, he's the expert on this. Paraphrasing what I hear you saying is, because people do it many times, because there's so much distortion when people aren't paying attention, or sometimes they are paying attention, but they've gone off on a tangent. Do you know? And there's so much being misinterpreted. So to really listen, to pay attention, to be fully present, we're always appealing to people to turn their screens off. Don't answer the phone. Don't be texting, watching for your texts. Don't have the computer on or anything that's distracting, and really look at each other. Look at each other in the eye. Do you know? Because that full presence stacks the deck for success. We tell people to slow down. And I'm very grateful to Sylvia Boorstein for teaching me about talking meditation. It's such a beautiful way of communicating more slowly. When you have the pauses after you deliver something that you say, to let it really land in them, and they feel into it before they respond to you. And that depth of the speaking and the listening helps them to become connected heart to heart. They're more apt to talk about their tender feelings, the fear that Charlie was referring to,
Right.
their hurt, their
Mhm.
loneliness. Do you
Mhm.
know, these very tender feelings? And these kinds of conversations, and we always are encouraging the couples that we work with to check in regularly, at least once a week. More is better.
Mhm.
To have these kind of meaningful conversations on a regular basis, because it heads off trouble at the pass. When you
Mhm.
feel really seen and heard and respected and valued, a lot of the things that irritate us and lead to the arguments, they just slough off and they become non-issues.
Mm. That's really good. Um, what about when we talk about issues? I think about a big one is trust. This comes up with people. What do you do when the trust is broken in a relationship? How do you work with someone like that? How do you guide them? What are the steps for repairing that trust? Because, gosh, I've worked with people over the years. You're like, I can't trust them, whether it be they were lied to, affair, porn addiction, gambling, wasting, spending all their money, like all these things. Like to build that trust back can be quite difficult for people. So, what do you recommend to do that? Can you rebuild trust?
Yeah, that's the big question. Is do you believe? And this is the person who is in an experience in a relationship in which there's been a violation of trust. Do you believe? Does that person believe that it's even possible to restore trust in a
Right.
relationship where there's
Right.
been, for example, a betrayal?
Mm-hmm.
And depending upon how that question is answered, it's the process is either going to go one way or the other, or there won't be a process at all.
Mm-hmm.
And the belief that it's not possible is really a defense against the possibility of wanting to avoid the possibility of yet another betrayal. Because if I believe it's not possible, I'm not even going to try. I'll cut my losses here, and I can't go through this again. This is
Right.
just too much.
Mhm.
And so it's a choice of whether or not we choose to believe that it's possible. If we can concede that, yeah, maybe it's at least possible, then the question, of course, is, well, how? How do we do that?
Mhm.
Because a few of us have really had the experience of, or even witnessed the repair and restoration of violated trust. We don't know what that looks like or what that involves. And we work with people who, many of the couples we work with have come in and done intensives with us, which is more than just like a 1 hour a week session, but it's a concentrated, extended period of time of a whole day, or sometimes even 2 days, because this process requires more than just, occasionally checking into it. It's like, this means you're going to have to do some intense work and spend a fair amount of concentrated time, both of you in agreement that this is what the goal, the intention is. And then to be willing to set up an understanding with each other that that's what you're here to do, and that it's going to require honesty, it's going to require integrity, it's going to require courage, because you're going to have to risk experiencing some things that are not going to be easy to experience, or to hear some things that you don't want to hear. But just to get people clear about, we're going, into some heavy duty stuff here, and you've got to be prepared, to go with this and to hang in there. And we reassure people that one way or another, you are going to be clear at the end of this process. And what you're going to be clear about is whether or not you are fulfilling or have fulfilled that commitment to begin to restore it, or that it's just not going to go. And so it requires the willingness on the part of both people to get unconditionally honest and to tell the truth and to practice self-restraint, so that when strong emotions come up, they don't indulge them, but they just practice, like what Linda said, committed listening, and speak from their heart. Speak, which doesn't mean that you're going to just say wonderful, nice things. It means you let your heart speak. Your heart might be angry, your heart might be hurt, your heart might be scared, but to speak from that place. And sometimes people can do that without the help of a facilitator, but with strong betrayals and with,
that's hard.
With serious breakdowns, you may need to bring in a third party to moderate it.
That is hard when you're in a very, very different place than your partner. And boy, if that trust has been broken, you sometimes do need to have a third party there with you to help to bring you back together. What people have asked me this, like, how long will it take me? And isn't it an individual process of who knows? Like, it's different for everybody, isn't it? Yeah.
It takes longer than your mind thinks it should take.
Yeah, right.
And sometimes it takes a year, sometimes it takes 2 years.
Yeah.
And there's so much repair that needs to be done.
Yeah. You have to rebuild trust. You have to rebuild. I mean, it doesn't happen overnight. You've got to.
Evidence has to come in.
Evidence. Yeah.
People have really learned what the conditions were that gave rise to the betrayal to start with, and that they really, no kidding, have made corrections that those conditions don't exist anymore.
It's not just about the words. It's you've got to see the words expressed through the person's behaviors
on a consistent basis.
That takes time.
Month after month after month, there isn't any cover up. There isn't any withdrawing from the challenge. There is talking about it. There are revealing the details and answering the questions, because the person that's betrayed wants to have some of their questions answered, and you can't dodge those. They need more information. And we have worked with so many couples over so many decades now, and seen relationships that were just train wrecks. Do you know that they didn't believe that they could repair? And we've seen them do the work, roll up their sleeves and get to work and start having the conversations that they weren't having before, and get real with each other and getting honest with each other. And it sometimes gets pretty heated, sometimes has to, for the truth to get on the table. And they learn from that. And we've seen them come through, not to the pre-broken trust level of trust, but more than
beyond
that.
Beyond it.
And we call that stronger at the broken places, like the broken leg, the calcification that goes on, that leg is even stronger than it was before the break. So we're convinced. And one of the statistics that breaks my heart is that most people who get divorced never go to one couples counseling session.
Really?
Yeah, and it's such a shame.
Didn't know that.
There are a lot of good couples counselors out there who, when you're both in doubt that this train wreck could ever get repaired, that somebody can be a stand for you and say, I've seen it happen. I know that it's possible. Now it's really up to you two, how hard you want to work, and whether there's enough in this relationship that you think it's worth salvaging. Do you could co-create a brand new relationship out of this breach of trust? And I'm from the school of thought of don't let a good crisis go to waste.
Right.
There's so much opportunity in that crisis.
I've got a question I'm going to throw out for you both. I'm wondering this. Do you feel like a really big reason why couples break up or the relationship doesn't work is because of lack of healthy communication? Would you say that?
I would say the majority of people who come to work with us, whether it's as a couple or in a group, identify the problem is we have a communication problem. So that's such a vague term that it doesn't really Yeah, I guess the answer is yes. Of course, it's about communication, but communication is a symptom of problem. The way in which they're communicating is frustrating both of them because it's not addressing effectively the differences between the people that have not been worked out in some way.
Yeah.
So yes, if you look at what else might it be underneath the label of communication problem, it could be the fear of vulnerability.
Yeah.
It could be emotional dishonesty. It could be compulsive or addictive behavior that they're not managing. It could be unfinished business from their past that they're dragging into this relationship. So it shows up as communication because we're either arguing with each other or we're not communicating much at all because we're both unwilling to get real.
Yeah.
So yeah, it shows up as communication, and that's where we start. From there, we have to get into like where specifically is this communication showing up and how is it showing up?
I'll give you an example. And yes, the big umbrella is communication skills, but then there's so many subcategories under that. People that we work with frequently aren't good at negotiating for their needs.
Yeah.
Right. They don't know what they are.
They need to.
They haven't even sat long enough to go drop inside and not only say, what are my needs? What am I feeling emotionally here?
And their feelings.
Right? I mean, yeah.
So the practice of mindfulness, of really getting curious about what's going on inside me, and to find ways to articulate that, to communicate it to my partner, requires some time and attention given to self. You have to feel like you deserve to take the time to do that. And there's qualities that people need to grow in themselves, like the self-discipline to shut the hell up when they want to indulge themselves in the statements and the blaming and the accusation and the defensiveness and the victim thought about, you know, things aren't working and it's all your fault, rather than growing in responsibility. Charlie already mentioned honesty and integrity. So there are all qualities that people need to grow in themselves to even be eligible to be a good communicator.
Yep. I like that a lot. That's really good. Thank you for that. What do you say to somebody that is wanting to come and do work? Let's say they want to come work with you guys or different couples, or they want to get into couples work, let's just say, but their partner is like, yeah, no, I don't want to do that. Or they don't want to do any sort of self work, but yet they don't want to leave their partner, but the partner just isn't really not interested. They're not interested in not only doing self-improvement work, but also working on their relationship. You can't poke and prod someone to work on their relationship. So what do you do? Like, at what point do you say, I'm out of here? Or do you can you actually lift someone off their butt to do their personal work and to come work with you in the relationship? I guess is my question.
No, I don't believe that you can make anybody do anything. Really, I've tried that.
I agree with you.
Work real hard at doing that. And the thing is that even if you do succeed in coercing somebody through intimidation or manipulation to do something, it's generally not going to stick. It's not going to hold.
Totally. Yep.
Because they haven't bought into it. You know, they've done it just to shut you up or to accommodate you, or because they're tired of arguing. Yeah, okay, I'll go along with it. But their heart isn't in it. So that doesn't work. And I think that's the first thing to recognize, is that I cannot make my partner do something that they want to do. But then we've got to get out of the polarized thinking of it's either one way or the other. You know, the zero-sum thinking, where either, you know, I just give up here, or else I just keep banging my head against the wall. No, there are other options here. And one of them is to look, rather than looking at how you want them to be different and what you want them to do, to look more at the way in which I am approaching this, the way I am dealing with them, and whether or not I might possibly be able to be more effective in having them begin to feel that there's something in it for them to maybe be willing to take a look at something that they're not looking at. It's like Linda said earlier, appeal to their enlightened self-interest, appeal to part of them that really does have something to gain by trying something that's outside of their comfort zone. The idea of counseling or therapy for a lot of people is terrifying.
Yeah, I agree.
And for those of us who have been there and who've done it, and we, we're not afraid of it anymore, and we see it as not only a good thing, but a life-enhancing thing that, we want to do. We want to know ourselves better. We're not afraid anymore to see what else, what other demons might be lurking in there, because we've learned how to befriend whatever is in there.
Right.
But it's easy to underestimate how afraid people are of doing that. When to us, I mean, to Linda, to me, to you, to a lot of listeners here, that's a good thing, that process of self-reflection. And there are ways in which we can convey to people that reassure them that, hey, this is really a good thing, and it's not scary, and just to kind of challenge that belief that they have, and to hang in there with them, not to push them, not to nag them, not to try to coerce them, but just to be an example of what a self-aware person is like.
I would add something to what Charlie was saying.
Yeah.
We come to call the couples where one of them is passionate about therapy and personal growth and spiritual development, and the other person's not having it.
Yeah.
We call it mixed marriage.
Yeah.
Back in the day, it used to be a mixed marriage if it was two different races.
Yeah.
Religions. But now we find a lot of couples that one of them is just like, this lives for me. I don't know how you couldn't. And we know that we see some of those relationships that thrive because they respect the differences. And they're not attached to my way is the way. And if you don't conform to my way of thinking, we're doomed. Not necessarily. The person who loves therapy and loves personal growth workshops and wants to read all those, development books, they need to go to the therapy and the workshops and do their own work. Maybe the other person will be inspired and they'll partake in some of it, and maybe they won't. But I think some of those relationships, the person thinks, if you don't come over to my camp, we're doomed, and they give up on a relationship that has potential instead of making a big space for the differences to float.
That's so true. I think that if you can respect your partner and what their path is, then all is well. I remember having a client, and she started this is years ago when I lived in Nashville. She started meditating and she loved it. And then she joined it was like a group work that she joined, loved that. And her husband would make fun of her. She'd meditate and he'd be like laughing at her and poking fun at her. And, we talked about setting boundaries, and it really caused a breakdown in their whole marriage, because what we realized underneath it all was what you talked about before, Charlie, fear. He was getting worried. He didn't verbalize it. But what we figured out was he didn't like her growing because she was changing. She was loving herself. She was valuing herself more. She started speaking up for herself more. She started changing in a beautiful, healthy way. What we realized is he was uncomfortable with that.
That's right.
Yep.
He didn't want her to change for the better. Yeah. So, and actually, I think that person actually ended up in a divorce because he couldn't take it. He did not like her changing. And she was like, but I'm setting boundaries for the first time in my life. It's a good thing. And it turned out fine, and they're great friends now. But I remember that was a difficult one. But I hear that often. People say, what am I supposed to do? They're not interested in joining me, and I want to go, to your workshop in Nashville in June, let's say, or wherever. And they don't want to come. But it's respect. If they can respect you, we're good. Okay, one last question for you guys. What do you think is the most underutilized practice in most relationships?
Well, I'm a big advocate of checking in.
I love that.
I
Yep.
think people don't check in enough.
Mm-hmm.
To check in with self and then report out to other on a regular basis. There's a point where checking in is absolutely crucial, and that's when we get triggered. Something is said or done or not said or done that cuts really close to the bone.
Mm-hmm.
And we are so overwhelmed with feeling. We're flooded with feeling. We may be angry, we may be frightened, we may, have catastrophizing thoughts. This relationship is doomed. We're so different. And that is when you need to take a break.
Mm-hmm.
And this is underutilized, and people stay in the conversation where they are not thinking straight, where the reptilian brain is the only thing that's active. Do you know, right at the top of the spinal cord, and it only knows fight or flight or freeze.
Yeah.
And if you take a break, this is so underutilized. Before you get so emotionally flooded, you calm down and your neocortex start to work again, where you have the best part of your brain, the creative part that has all kinds of options. Where you don't feel so threatened, where you don't feel that you're being attacked or humiliated or whatever is really activating you. And when you take a small break, sometimes a breath or two is enough. Other times you're so activated, you need longer amount of time.
Right.
Not more than a day. Some people take days, weeks. That's not okay. But to come back more calm, cool, and collected, then you're more apt to be able to speak about the fear, the pain, the loneliness, the disconnect, and to have heart-to-heart, meaningful conversations where you feel connected, where you learn and understand. Maybe not agree, but you learn and understand, and that's a lot. So we always are encouraging people, especially when they have trouble with arguments. Take a break, check in, pull yourself together, come back, and then check in with each other about what's going on. The vulnerable, tender heart material conveyed back and forth.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Is there anything else that you want to share right now about what couples need to end arguing? Did we cover it all? We covered a lot, I got to say. This was great.
The only thing I'd add is read the book.
Yeah.
Because there's 101 ways of doing that.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you that if you find even one that really is suitable for your situation, that you're going to get way more than your money's worth out of the book.
It'll go a long way, you're saying, if you find just one thing, right?
Yeah,
that's great.
Any one of them could be it.
Awesome.
And I want to add that believe it's possible.
Yes.
Because I'm one of these people who some time ago didn't believe it was possible to have a relationship where there wasn't arguing. But I've come to understand that you could have a very passionate interchange, a debate, a conversation, a discussion, but don't pass that crucial line where you're trying to make the other person wrong, or you're trying to convince them to change their mind, or change their behavior. And that's where you get into an argument. Of course, we're going to have differences, but they don't have to turn into arguments and conflict.
Right.
If we're that mindful and self-disciplined, and we've done our work to stay on the right side.
Right.
That we have this animated interchange. It's lively. It's intense sometimes, but it's not an argument. And so believing that it's possible, and Charlie's right, if they read the book, they'll become a believer.
I would hope they could find one thing, right? I mean, we could all just find one thing out of 101, 101 valuable lessons.
I want your listening audience to know that we're coming to the South. We're going to be doing a workshop in June. It's June 9 to 11 at the Wellbeing Center in Tazewell, Tennessee.
Oh,
So we
nice.
never taught there before. We heard it's a beautiful center, and I'm really enjoying talking to the people who are inviting us to come and teach there. So I'm looking forward to it.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. And where would people find you and find more information out about when you're coming to Nashville? Let us know. What if you have a website? Tell us everything.
Yeah, just going to our website would give them access to all kinds of stuff. And the website is Bloomwork, BLOOMWORK.
Beautiful.
.com, and that will that'll take them to the website, and there's contact information there, how to reach us. There are also ways of you can get. We're offering 3 free ebooks.
Oh, great.
Who request them through the website. So yeah, that's the best way to do it.
Perfect. We'll put all of those links in the show notes. And you also, it says here, have Instagram and even Facebook too. We'll put those in the show notes as well.
Great.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on today. This was really a wonderful conversation. And again, thank you for the work that you're doing in the world. We need you. We need you both.
You're very welcome, and thank you for the work that you're doing in the world too.
Yeah.
Thank you.